It's Street Talk, conversations with state and community leaders about the latest news on transportation, regional planning, and transit for Middle Tennessee.
But things do wear out over time, and I think today people look at I-440 and say, you know, DDOT did a pretty good job there.
Hi, my name is Tanisha Hall, host for today's Street Talk. Here with my co-host Stanton Higgs from TMA Group, and that was Paul Degges, TDOT Deputy Commissioner. Paul oversees the design and implementation of the department's engineering projects. Paul has overseen the awarding of more than 6,200 contracts with a construction value of more than $13 billion. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Tanisha. I appreciate being here today.
I'm super curious what your read is on the future for the autonomous vehicles and how it interacts with the infrastructure that you've been building, and maybe give us a little of your vision of what do you think is going to happen.
Sure. So I think that a lot of the technology issues are going to be central to autonomy and connected vehicle type issues. But I think if you look at most people, look, I'm an engineer, I'm a car guy, I fix stuff. I pop the hood and look at things. You know, most people don't. Most people, when they get in the car, they put the foot on the gas, they want it to go. And I think what we're seeing in the manufacturing industry is that the electrification of the fleet is starting to happen. Again, most people don't care what the fuel is. If they can resupply the energy source in their car or truck fairly quickly, they don't care what it is, they just want to get the cheapest price. So I think that the electrification is probably one of the first steps you're going to see. And along with that electrification comes a lot of different opportunities in technology. And so, you know, I talked about some of the changes that we've made in the network as far as from an operations standpoint. You know, we have a pilot project on I-24 right now between Nashville and Murfreesboro that's looking at how can we maximize the efficiency of that using technology. You know, part of that is providing driver information, but another piece of that is providing communication back and forth with the transportation network and the vehicles. We have three original equipment manufacturer industries in Tennessee for automobiles. We have General Motors, Nissan, and Volkswagen. Plus we have a lot of suppliers that do work for, you know, we make engines for Toyotas in Jackson, Tennessee. So having some of this technology where we have these roadside units at traffic signals that are transmitting the signal timing information to automobiles. I have seen there's a couple of manufacturers that make vehicles that can read that data, and your car knows what that signal you're coming up to is about to do. It's just not that far from the car being able to drive itself and to maximize its efficiency by going through a road and speeding up or slowing down just a little bit to be able to accommodate that. And so I think that that's some of the real opportunities of autonomous vehicles, semi-autonomous vehicles are going to have for us. We did a lot of work in the General Assembly about 5 years ago looking at platooning of trucks on the freeway network. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to come, and we're gonna see a lot of increase in our productivity. And if you look at it from a two perspective, economic, a highly productive economy is more competitive on the worldwide stage. So we want to be efficient and competitive on that side of things from an economic standpoint, but also from a quality of life standpoint. And I think that one of the things that we're going to see coming out of the coronavirus is that, you know, you don't necessarily have to be in the office, you know, 40 hours a week to be effective. And I think that you're going to see there's some quality of life issues. I know so many of our employees were uber productive when they could sit down and focus on the work they had to do and not be distracted 100 times in an hour. So I think that there's some real opportunity for us from a technology standpoint. And I think it starts with the electrification of the fleet.
So Paul, you just talked about how uber productive people were. We have so many businesses move, especially large companies moving to Middle Tennessee in particular. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe are there issues or things that employers can do to help maybe not improve transportation, but help reduce some of the congestion that's out there? 'Cause with the businesses come people, comes potential traffic and everything. Are there ways for them to kind of play a real solid role in transportation?
Sure. So this is kind of a little bit humorous, but so when the coronavirus hit, and we had sent everybody home, and we were trying to figure out how to get everybody back in the building, it quickly became apparent that our elevators were an issue. We were limiting the number of people in the elevators, so we got our traffic engineers to look at it. And we did demand modeling on the elevators. And one of the things that we did is we reached out to all of our directors, and we started staggering when people would be in the building, when they would arrive, and when they would depart. Similarly, on the transportation network, that's something that we've tried to do is, travel demand management, trying to look at, can we work with particularly the larger employers in Middle Tennessee and say, hey, here is where we're seeing the peaks in traffic. If you had your people come, if we worked together and had certain people come in at 7 o'clock, some at 7:30, some at 8, some at 8:30, and so forth, that instead of having a single peak traffic demand at rush hour, we would flatten that curve and it would reduce the instantaneous demand on the travel network. I think that that's a real opportunity, particularly technology is allowing us to do a whole lot more in that area. Transit is a good tool to help support that, whether it is public transit or some larger employers. Opryland used to run a shuttle up to Clarksville every day. It was a big employment center. And so there's public and private demand management. And of course, certainly with Uber, and I heard that there's some of the larger cities in the U.S., there is this shared Uber to where it's probably not even Uber, but it's a shared services.
Pooled services.
Pooled services. And of course, I always called that, well, that's transit, But so I think that those types of opportunities are out there to look at how can we manage that demand, and particularly with Nashville kind of becoming a southern tech hub, that I think that we're going to start seeing those types of entities solving that problem themselves, working with their employees and saying, hey, this doesn't make sense, let's start staggering our workflow. State government's done it for years, and so it's been relatively low tech, but we've done it. We've got van pool programs, and we support some of the transit work for state employees as well.
So TMA got started by Diane Davidson, and then we've had Diane Thorne and Debbie Henry now. Started originally in the 80s with a vision that we were going to have some congestion issues, problems, especially in Middle Tennessee. When I think back about them starting that in the 80s, and I thought, well, what problems could we have had? But now we're in 2020 and thinking, oh my goodness, they really had a vision. So TMA now in 2020, 21, what do you see organizations that such as ours, a nonprofit, someone that has a passion for ride sharing, for transit, for TDM, how can we help? How can we get more involved, or what do you need from organizations like ourselves to assist?
Well, I mean, I think certainly TMA plays a role of bringing the various entities together. You know, it's important that we have that cross-pollination between different programs out there. You know, I mean, TDOT owns the state highway system. That is a big component of, you know, what we're looking at, and sometimes there's at least a perspective that we're not as interested in the other modes. I would argue we are a Department of Transportation, not a Department of Roads and Highways. But I think that groups like TMA, bringing groups together, TMA is an entity that really looks at what are the cutting edge issues going on across the, you know, the platform of transportation, and, you know, keeping that kind of on the minds of the public officials that are running these programs is a opportunity for groups like TMA.
Paul, I know you've already talked about, you know, the pandemic and the effects it had on employees, and potentially, you know, how you guys might transform work. And but in regards to the projects that you have to get done, everybody around Tennessee kind of sees that there's issues with labor and with just the overall production that needs to happen. Are you struggling with that with TDOT? And let me know.
Sure. So, you know, even prior to the pandemic, one of the things that we were starting to see was competition for human resources out there. So, you know, certainly we've got inflationary trends in materials and commodities, but finding labor, not only in the contractor area, but even for TDOT. I mean, there was a day that if I put an advertisement on the street for a maintenance worker position in Middle Tennessee, I might get 300 job applicants. Today, I'm lucky if I get 5, and of the 5 that I get, I'm lucky if 1 or 2 of them even show up for the interview. And so it's just a very competitive market here in Middle Tennessee. We're struggling. Our contractors are struggling to hire people. You know, I do a lot of work in economic recruitment activities, and you know, when you're dealing with, you know, pulling a company that wants to pull, you know, I mean, if it's less than 100 jobs, it's typically not that bad. But what we're seeing across the state is that there are a lot of communities that have full employment, or near full employment, but it's underemployment. So if you bring, if a company's looking to relocate, and we're seeing this with our contractors as well, is does somebody want to do the type of work in the transportation industry where you're out on the side of the road? It's supposed to be 100 degrees today, for instance. You got, you know, 80,000-pound vehicles whizzing by you, or can you go get a job in the air conditioning somewhere? And so it's a big struggle our contractors are faced with. If you'll look around town, you'll still see some billboards with some of the highway contractors advertising on them. The pay's well in this industry, and I would note that there's a lot of job security in this industry with transportation needs really just growing every day. I think that there's a good opportunity for a career in this industry, whether you're you know, an engineer or a planner, or you know, or you know, I mean, I love pouring concrete. I mean, it's a rewarding thing to see things built. And so as we started going into the pandemic, and people started hunkering down, and all we still did over $1 billion worth of construction contracts in 2020. But we are really seeing some struggles right now with getting employees to where we can do work at the pace that it needs to be done.
So, you've heard the saying, be the change you want to see in the world. If you could tell commuters 3 things that they can do to help improve air quality and reduce congestion, what would those things be?
I think the number one thing is to plan your transportation, plan your trip. If you're going to go somewhere, do a little bit of homework before you go. The technology that's available today for somebody to just almost instantaneously get answers to questions is if you do a little bit of planning work on your trip, I think that's number one, will make your life a lot easier. And also look at the demand. I mean, do you need to take a trip? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we saw in Memphis right now. We've had to close the Interstate 40 bridge over the Mississippi River due to a fractured member on the bridge, and we put all of the traffic on the I-55 bridge. And of course, we're measuring the traffic every day. Some of the traffic has just disappeared. And that's where people, by necessity, are having to look at their commute and saying, I think I'll work from home today. It makes more sense. And so we saw some of the traffic evaporate in there. Of course, we're opening it back up next week, and I suspect a lot of people will make the decision to cross the river that day. But I think that's a critical issue, is planning your trip. But certainly look at when you're trying to come to work. We have a lot of people in the Nashville area that choose to drive an hour or more on their commute every day. That's one of the challenges. I think it's particularly a southern city challenge that we deal with. I've worked with people over the years that lived in Manchester, Jamestown, Livingston, and really, really long commutes every day of the week. I've got an employee I know I was talking to earlier this week, commutes from Cookeville every day. And his position is that his quality of life for his family is better met living in Cookeville than living somewhat closer to Nashville where he's working.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Sure. I enjoyed it. Good seeing you guys. I'm sure we'll see you around.
It's Street Talk. Conversations with state and community leaders about the latest news on transportation, regional planning, and transit for Middle Tennessee.